You should get a notice. Okay, so Richard, take it away.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Cello, and hello everyone. It's been a month since I've seen and spoken to you all. So thanks to Patricia for helping out with the meeting a fortnight ago. And it was great to see lots of feedback coming out of that session as well. You would have seen in some of the communications that have gone around that we will be following up on some of the topics, etc., that were discussed last time out. So we'll use the opportunity that we've got today to pick up with one another to do that. And then hopefully at the end of this session we will go and send out the actual poll to capture responses to help us form a plan for covering some of those topics in future sessions and then potentially in workshops as well. So hopefully you can see my screen now. Yep. That's up. Yeah, that's up there. So we'll share that. But that's the agenda we'll follow. Jonathan, I know we haven't met before, so hello. I'll probably pick up with you separately just to say hello, but obviously welcome to the group. And it looks like we've got everyone else that is there that we've seen on previous calls before. So that's good. A couple missing. And actually, I do get a bounce back consistently from Matt at Clean Water. So I guess it's just making sure that Paul's captured in there. Speaking of which, rather than Matt. So I'll make those updates to them.
I'm sorry, Matt Stickler retired. We should take him up.
Yeah, I thought I did hear that. So I just haven't taken him off the circulation, but that's okay. And Paul's here, obviously, which is good. So yeah, looks like we've got everyone here. Just along the theme of culture of caring. I won't reuse the coffee one, but I thought we've been trying to reflect on a couple of these in Team 200. Team 200. It's part of what we do just before meetings, and I thought I'd bring one across today because it sort of struck me as I prepare for breakfast, which you're all probably having in the States at the moment, in terms of the information and what I take in when I'm preparing breakfast with my son. So my culture of caring moment today is around Black History Month. And it's Black History Month here in the UK today. Not today, this month, obviously. And I haven't engaged with it to a great deal so far, not actively anyway. I think on the back of a lot of the protests around Black Lives Matter back in May and June, and certainly over the summer, there was a bit of recognition of how I could engage with that a little bit more and be more active, supporting friends, colleagues, etc. And I actually took a step back. It was last night, because all throughout, what I haven't realized is throughout this month, during my the kids cartoon sort of program every morning, they have a specific Black History Month moment where they talk about historical figures who have sort of, push forward change across society from all across the globe. And I thought that's actually a really good place to start to engage with getting this conversation going. I'm from a white family. My boy is certainly white, but for him to see that as he's eating his breakfast and watching his cartoons, I think is really, really powerful, and a good way to sort of start that conversation with him as a very young person. So there's that side of it. And then the other side of it, I thought was, well, actually, a lot of what I've been listening to from a podcast perspective is very much around dissecting music and understanding where artists come from in terms of a lot of what they're speaking about. So I looked to a favorite of mine, Kendrick Lamar, all right, who's from Compton, on the West Coast there. Amazing the stories and the frustration and the aspirations that he puts out in his music. And it's only through being able to take some sort of Zen time with the headphones in and listening to those podcasts that I've been able to actually connect with and understand a lot of sort of these cultural issues that have existed, particularly for people of color. So really interesting to see it sometimes just takes you stepping back to realize how you might be engaging with something. So I'd encourage you all to just take a step back and think about if there's something you want to engage with, a cause, a charity, or anything that you feel you want to invest in. It does help to just take a step back and think about how you might be doing that.
Thanks for doing that, Richard.
No worries. Yeah, but by all means, you're welcome to comment on that inside of this, outside of this, however you like. But that's the purpose of the culture of the caring moment for sure. Okay, so we'll move on to pretty much bang on time. The next agenda item, which is just general questions and comments for consideration. It should be pretty quick. This, I know you captured a lot from last time, so I don't think we'll cover this in a great deal. It's probably going to come out of the main discussion points. But is there any burning questions that people have that they want to bring to a future session? That is okay.
I think Patricia actually did a great job of documenting, topics that people brought up. And as you said, I think it's going to be part of the discussion here today.
I do think Doug has his hand up.
Doug, you do. Yes, please step in. Did you want to add something in, Doug? Can you hear us?
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what Patricia said, I guess.
Yeah.
I know I was volunteered to do a presentation for this morning, but I've got our budget discussions this last week. I can in 2 weeks do a 15-minute presentation on our service level metrics here at Portland Water, so you can count me in on that agenda if that's of interest to the group.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about we have 27 high-level metrics that cover the whole organization, and then about 170 other metrics that hang underneath that, that are routinely tracked throughout the year, and many of which are reported in our budget documents when we go through our annual budget development. So not to say that it's just sort of a perfect process, but it's a work in progress. But I'd be happy to do a report out on that, and I will be ready to do that in a couple of weeks.
No worries.
Mike Sweeney, Tim Noyes isn't on this particular call and team, but he raised, I think it was in a risk team context, the same thing that Doug just mentioned, saying, what about metrics and performance related to asset management plans? So, if that was something that and Tim also wanted to do in connection with what Doug is proposing, that would certainly be, welcome.
It was on this group. It was on the email thread about the topics we would like to address.
Yeah. So I think that actually works really well, Doug. If don't stress yourself, let's push it back a couple of weeks and then dovetail it in with hopefully what Tim can present from Toho as well.
No, I think that's a great idea, because our service level metrics are also reported in our amps. So, yep. So there's a good dovetail there. Yep.
Well, out of courtesy to Tim, I will discuss this with him. I know he's continually slammed, and but he's still participating as much as he can. So let me touch base with him and get back.
And you could do that too, Mike, if it didn't work out for Tim, if you wanted. So up to you.
Yeah.
I get that, but it's
yeah.
We'll discuss it.
Yeah.
No worries. Cool. One that I had actually, and I'll have to bring together a bit of a report out to start with, was an idea of capturing asset system risk in AMPS. Okay, so we in TIM 200 we call it portfolio risk. So what's your exposure across your system? We're finding it's a bit of a battle to try and communicate what we're trying to articulate through that in our AMPS, and ultimately what is our contractor's plan, which is that longer term sort of investment commitment. So at the moment we've got a risk exposure. It's not so much around enterprise risk, although I think there might be some crossover. So I'll take your view on that, Scott. But it's around the risk to the assets themselves. So I'd like to bring a session forward to
sure.
Probably cover that as
sure.
well. Yeah.
Yep.
And Patricia, when we were speaking about it, that was what I'd forgotten.
We could contribute to that, because we also do that in our AMPS. We
Yep.
have an asset level risk, I mean, we have what we call a bureau-wide risk, or our CLEM process.
Okay.
So, and it's a way for us to look at risk across asset types, as well as look at the individual risk of an asset failure.
As Doug knows, you know, we have a risk team as well, and it's perfectly appropriate to do it here, but it also, in the end, might be of interest to that particular team. We could just see how it evolves, right? But
I think so.
yeah.
Well, it could be, Scott. I mean, the enterprise risk team is looking at things from a bit of a different perspective than this. Because at least from my perspective, what we do in our AMPS is the bureau-wide risk is still asset level risk, but it's a way to compare hydrants to valves to distribution mains, right? Where the enterprise risk is more sort of strategic issues the business has to deal with.
Yeah.
So
No, that's right.
They're related, but a bit different focus.
Yeah. You mentioned the portfolio risk, and I guess it could be a portfolio related to an asset class or something, but
Yeah.
I think it would actually help inform that group a little bit, maybe when it's all said and done, but you know, very appropriate here.
Well, maybe when we do that topic, we could have a joint call with that group.
Yeah, or follow up with that group afterwards, maybe, just to keep it simple here.
Okay, cool. Okay, all right. That's a good couple of suggestions there. Thank you. So yeah, definitely, I like the idea of metrics and service levels, and appreciate that. Should be able to get some feedback on portfolio risk too.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to, so we've got two items here. The first is the AMP topics review. So the main item for discussion is just go through the list. I'll flick over onto the next page, just see if we can identify any missing topics there that you weren't able to contribute back on email. Quick discussion, and then we just try and get some sort of agreement that Patricia started working up last week. So I'll probably just allow you to facilitate some of that, Patricia. And then the last one is the second thing that was circulated on email, was just additions of any other assets or systems onto that list. So we did cover some discussion on it just then when you were explaining system and bureau risk, but we've got a list here that I've added a few storm surge related systems to that we can probably just go through as well. So for now, thanks for the feedback last time out, but these are the potential topics for workshops, which you can see on screen here. So this column is the workshops. This column is the improvement initiatives. We've gone exhaustive, but the idea through the poll is to then get that back to a level that's manageable, looking at how frequently we do gather with one another. So is there anything that is jumping out at people that could be missing from there?
Richard, one thing I think I brought up to Patricia, and it may not, you know, meet the threshold test here, but as an emerging area, the whole use of drone technology for inspection, for condition related to different assets is something that I know you are doing at Team 2100, but so too are others using drone technology, and that I'm just, you know, it may not be the highest priority here, but that was one thing that I noticed could be on the list.
Definitely. In terms of the program over here, part of the challenge in our business case was to come up with a new complementary inspection process that sits beside the work the asset inspectors as individuals, as people, go out and complete. And that's where the sort of the drone thinking has come from, or the remote data capture through sort of photogrammetry technology. So I think that's probably, if we cover asset condition assessment and think about what that means, Scott, definitely a topic area for drones within that.
And it could be other, you know, internal pipeline, you know, type of inspections as well, right? as a technology, but it may or may not be of, high priority to this group, but, it's possible.
Cool. I think Tim had mentioned around some of the specific items he thought may have fit under asset under monitoring, I think it was, or continuous improvement strategy. So looking at his email, which I'll just bring back up to myself, but I think that was fair enough that it was covered under that category. Although again, it just gives it a bit more description. What were they? I'll pull those up.
Richard, there's one that seems to be off the list that I'd be curious to see what other people are doing, and that's what we call our future funding needs assessment, which is how you roll all the costs up together at the end of the AMP.
Yep.
And so that we've historically done it with a whole potpourri of different spreadsheets, and we're moving to a consistent platform, a program that an outside developer is working with us on to do it with a computerized program, where we actually predict failure modes, remaining useful life, put the risk assessment data in, and have the model actually determine, potential replacement years and replacement costs, so that it's a bit more systematic.
I guess.
And Jenny, I think, in related to that, Doug, is you're talking about data and the use of data. That's also how do you apply that in your budgets and your kind of life cycle, type of models that you have. And I think that you were looking at an overall SAMP too, Jenny, an overarching one. But those seem to be a couple things that you had brought up.
I guess I would just add to that so at least for us, we cover that under life cycle modeling and life cycle costs.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe those two are things that we can look at together.
Yeah.
You had a name for it, Doug. What was it? Sorry, I didn't quite capture that.
We call it the future funding needs assessment, where we actually predict future data and replacement costs and put them all on a graph, and we're able to add them up, and that sort of tells the budget story at the process of asset management's documented through the chapters in the AMP, but the end of the line, people really want to know, well, what are the costs going to be, and how does my current budget line up with that? And it's that process, right?
So that's really interesting, because that starts to go into some of what we talk around over here around portfolio risk. So that future funding needs assessment, what we're using portfolio risk to do is try and articulate what that needs case might be. It's not so much an assessment, that's activities that follow that. So that sounds like that could fit into there as well. Yeah.
And one of the I think great strides we've made in the last 3 years is we have 22 AMPs that we do as a Water Bureau, but they've been kind of like sitting on the shelf once we've done them. And just this year, we're now taking all of our asset management plans, and they're front and center in the budget discussion, right? So we've gotten to the point where there's enough rigor in the AMPs now that they're driving the budget discussion as all the program managers put together their next year's budget, both capital and operational budgets. It's been really cool to see asset management evolve to the point where it's got sort of that level of involvement in where the agency's going to spend their dollars.
Yep.
That's good.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah. Okay. So it looks like, just coming back to drones as well, Scott, there's a topic for a workshop, but potentially for an improvement initiative if you think about where technology is supporting AM generally. So we might want to think about what we cover in a workshop from a technology perspective, coming into someone who can actively, report out from a case study perspective.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
This might be jumping ahead a little bit, but there's beyond this particular team, which is doing fantastic, by the way, there is broader interest in what this team is doing. And so when we talk about workshops, I mean, maybe it's kind of two levels here. One is, what sharing do we do on this team sort of to set up future workshops that could have a wider audience, and then so hitting the topics that we settle on, you know, with this team, but also figuring out what we could do in terms of a broader, wider audience type of workshops on some, you know, things of broad interest. Kind of just throwing that out there, because we need to, you know, not deal just, we need to integrate with some players who can't make every team meeting, different team meetings, but they do have an interest, and there are some overlaps.
Yep.
Chris. I just have one thought. Looking at the list, I think this is a great list, but I don't necessarily see that human element of developing the AMP and the process. So, you know, maybe creating the team and how to engage the stakeholders, how to communicate the value of AMP. I mean, Doc sort of touched on in his process that he's sort of using this information to drive the budget discussions. So all that sort of interaction with people and how to maximize the value of this, you know, the quantitative analysis and the monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
That is a really good one. Yeah, that's almost a weekly dilemma that we try and encounter here in Team 2100. So actually, that's quite important in terms of possibly moving that one up to cover from an earlier perspective. And
I would add the use of our asset management steering committee has been critical through the program development. It's how do you keep all the various parts of the organization on side as you develop it?
Yeah, and I wonder then, Scott, that would certainly be a topic that would be of interest to the people groups.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the people groups are doing a lot of great work, but what you guys are doing, and actually, if you look at the like CIP groups that are teams that are meeting, they are doing similar things in terms of how do you roll this out? How do you engage? How do you deal with change? How do you deal with the workforce? And these are practical examples of that. So there would be really great interest with the people teams in terms of how you apply it and how it relates to change management, culture, and workforce.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is around. Yeah, I mean, the question, I won't pose it now to you, Chris, but it will be around, have you undertaken some benchmarking? Have you buddied up with another organization outside of a network like this, etc., just to sort of learn from one another? So there could be something we cover in benchmarking and sort of mutual maturity assessments between similar organizations or departments even.
Yeah. It's been absolutely pivotal in the Portland Water Bureau's development over the years. I mean, and that benchmarking work has actually driven the organization to improvements they wouldn't have otherwise made.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I'd reflect similarly for here in the UK. It has been, we've tried to align that very much with the AM planning process and our system development generally. Yeah. And
looking at the people on the phone, I mean, it applies to Vancouver, it applies to Toho, it applies to Portland, it applies to Tacoma for sure. And you know, it's not the major theme here, but you know, it's driving improvement, helping to drive improvement and change.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, well, I think we've probably added to that list. Is there anything that's jumping out at you, Pat? I know we've probably created a bit more, which might make it a bit harder to vote on these. But...
Yeah, can we, before we proceed, question for Cello, is there a phone number that Tim can dial in for audio? He's asking on the chat.
I don't. It is not in the invite, but in the future, yes. So in the future, I can provide a phone for the invites.
Cello, can you just go ahead and put him on your cell phone and stick it next to your computer?
Okay. Does he? Can you text him my phone number?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. I'll do my best to make the sound work. I have to change the sound on my end as well.
Yep.
Other than that, Rich, no additions. I might, so on the topics that we have subtopics, they might just look really long in the workshop, and it might be that we might need more than one session to address those. So just as a FYI, but easy to pull together the poll and us to vote.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we view those as just prompts for what that session could also include, then that covers off the suggestions people have made. Yeah.
Just an encouragement, maybe it's a later step, Patricia, but to the extent you can, we've done a little bit of it here, but consolidate a couple of these, you know, it might make it look a little less onerous.
Yep. Okay.
Definitely.
This is Paul. This is Paul. I was just wondering if we want to add some maybe data visualization, some data components here, like data quality potentially.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get. I know it's a huge topic, right? But following the data collection all the way through the process, utilizing the data and making sure it gets to, you know, to the CIP, CapEx, OpEx type things. It's kind of nice to follow that through to make sure we're collecting what we need to answer the questions that are being asked, and to visualize that so we can communicate that to others as well.
That might relate to what Doug was talking about earlier in terms of data collection, data visualization, and the relationship of that to the budget, Paul. I mean, it's a really good point. Yep. But that we might be able to link those together.
Okay. It's a good one. Yep.
Yeah.
I could definitely spend the time talking about that. For sure. We're at a point where we've just got to rationalize things because there's too much. So if there's too much, what is of quality, and how do you then convey that to the intended audience? Yeah. Okay, we'll move on to the improvement initiatives, which is just on the right of the screen here. Again, it was whether people wanted to add anything else. I think I had added in a couple on the back of the last call after discussion and a debrief with Pat, which is some strategic peer-to-peer alliance working. I think some of that would be covered through benchmarking. So again, it alludes a little bit to what you've said around the people element, Chris. But otherwise, you know, AI and that remote technology, I think that what's the word I'm looking for? It spans both the topics for workshops and potentially a case study as well. Continuous improvement strategies. Again, you could look at possibly benchmarking and maturity assessments for that. But yeah, I mean, I guess if we're looking for some feedback from all of us here on the group around whether we would have a valid case study to talk to any of those bullet points, I think that would be a question, and I'd ask probably just that you consider that if there is one of those that, from an improvement initiative perspective, you could feed into.
So Richard, looking at those, and I'm thinking of Jenny actually, who I think, I'm not sure that what her interest was, that it's expressed there. So if you sent this out with the survey and then asked for the individual, feedback on, asking people to further define the case study that they're, thinking of doing, then that would be great. And because we want to give latitude to each utility, each partner to do the case study that they want to do, regardless of what's over on the left-hand side over there.
Yeah, I'd certainly support that. We'll just leave it in a poll for, yeah, go Jenny, sorry.
I was just going to say, I do think it fits in with that capability improvement. I think that's perfectly aligned with where we're going. I just, in the back of my head, am wondering if anyone else is feeling similarly of, I don't know that Tacoma's in a place to say, here's how we've done that improvement, but more, here are the questions we have about that kind of improvement, and in a place of posing questions to the group that maybe I'm thinking about the workshop, if that would be more of value to anyone else to have that wrestling of how do you prioritize these questions, how do you answer these questions, and not necessarily have, here is a standard that we've already done that we're ready to share.
Jenny, one perspective would be that these case studies is kind of what you're planning to do between now and May, as opposed to what you've already done. And in terms of and that's certainly appropriate to share in, let's say, a later case study towards the, the end of the project, but, maybe the workshop, kind of agenda might align more to what we see on the left-hand side of this screen in terms of topics that are, that are being done, and where and considering there could be a large audience where something could get presented and then there could be some dialogue around that, some two-way dialogue around that. Mm-hmm. Just a thought.
I like that approach. I know that Jonathan and I have chatted about this being a really great sounding board kind of before we go to a change initiative with our colleagues of, have you thought about this, or here's an approach. I would find that really valuable myself.
Right.
Yeah, I think having the chance to even go through a work in progress, like I could see us potentially doing one, it just disappeared off the list. AM supporting technologies.
Just up here,
yeah. We're certainly not done, but I think there's maybe some lessons learned for other folks about what we've struggled with to get to where we are, and certainly would be interested in feedback from other folks about how we might progress to the next step. So it wouldn't have to be sort of a completed case study, but I think the sounding board idea is a really good one.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, both of what you've said there that's what I saw as some of the intention of the group this year, is to provide that platform. And then the case studies show that we're all getting benefit from being involved in this way on the basis that we are, which is relatively infrequently. So I think, let's take a look at it from that perspective, just firm those up. I think they're two really good, strong workshop ideas that could leverage some case studies coming out of them for sure.
Digital Answers is one of those too, Richard.
That's right. Yeah, I put it in the list.
Yeah, and there would be very wide interest across the larger team, in that as well. Yeah.
It might also provide a platform for people to say, well, I'm glad to listen to what Team 2100 did, but I don't want to do it that way.
Yeah.
There's good lessons from a lot of perspectives here, right?
Yeah. Yep. We want to identify what the limitations are across our organizations, some of the things that will stop others from doing that. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Hopefully we've captured that. I might just ask you, Jenny, to think about whether those improvement initiatives, case studies we're talking about a sounding board and having that there as your feedback, possibly around the people element and testing something out with a group before you implement it. But I think that's a pretty good list to consider. Right. Okay. I think we'll move on then to the asset groups review. So I'll skim down to this section here. This one should be fairly straightforward, but do you want to come in on this one actually, Pat, just in terms of having covered it last time out? But
Yeah.
your list is what we're working from here, Mike, with just a couple of additions made to it.
Yeah, I guess I'll just introduce and maybe ask Mike if he wants to add anything. But basically, when we initially discussed the list of topics that we might want to talk about in the workshops, Mike suggested that we actually divided them by asset groups or asset classes. And I think that absolutely makes sense. The topics that you see in the above list in red are the ones where I see there's potential for us to discuss specific asset groups or classes. And then he suggested this list of groups. And then I don't know, maybe we talk about the topic in general to start with, and then sort of like go into the nitty-gritty details of it, talking about some specific groups that might be of more interest to you, or that you might be struggling with to define some of these things that we're going to be discussing. So we thought we would divide it in two. So first, understand what are the topics that are more interesting to the group, or of where the group has more more interesting to the group, I guess that's right. And then once we define that, we go into, okay, so which asset groups or classes should we focus on for each of these topics? And then I guess I'll ask Mike whether you agree with that or not, or if you have a better idea.
No, I think that's a good approach. The whole purpose of this breakdown of these assets groups is to make our process more accessible to people that are really focusing on any particular area. So it tends toward maybe a little more tactical, but again, it's just maybe touch points. If you think of these asset groups as touch points, for a utility that's really concentrating on one or more of these, where they're at and where they're going next.
So, Mike, I'm wondering if you would agree with this, is that up above in red and, that discussion are almost, what are some content areas or innovations or, features that could be included in an asset class, regardless of what asset class it is. And then, the asset class itself which is less fully developed in the industry as it could be, right? That there could be examples of how those things up above have been incorporated within a particular asset class as an example, including the metrics and performance discussion that, Tim raised earlier as well.
Absolutely correct. That's another way of, of interfacing with the idea. Just what you said, Scott.
This is Cello. I just wanted to say, I'm really delighted to see the discussion proceeding without me having to say much, but that's like the biggest reward for me, trust me. I wanted to ask if this would be helpful. I'm also engaged on another Water Research Foundation project called Smart Utilities and Intelligent Water Systems, which really looks at the right column of that people, process, technology stack, matrix that we have discussed. So at the next call, I would be happy to show some of the things we're doing there. It's not specific to asset management, but it's basically expands that column on the right, the technology column, and provides a structure for it that maybe really provide a basis for a very fruitful discussion, because you know, the people, you know, the people are you know, interested in this, and just a proposal.
Yeah, I think it's a good one, Cello. Even if it was almost, well, one option would be we pick up outside of this forum here, take a look at that, and then use it as almost like the opening sort of context builder to what a workshop could be around those supportive technologies and AI. Then you've got sort of here's what the industry is looking at, and here's what we do within our relevant organizations. Yeah, that certainly sounds interesting, for sure.
So Cello, are you saying that there's also a framework, and that the framework could relate to the, you know, the methodology that we have on UAIM?
That is correct. I think that project, what we have done in UAIM, we have provided a framework that's on a bit higher level, and it doesn't go into sort of detail it goes into detail on the process level, but it doesn't do an equivalent depth on the people and the technology side. So on the people side, we now have, as part of UAIM, we're looking at different components. You know, we're looking at workforce, we're looking at different maturity models, we're looking at different systems models. So maybe if I present this kind of view, it might help us in our discussions, because on the technology level, I can briefly say that, you know, the 4 layers that we've defined, and this has not yet been, this is very, very much in the works and not yet published or anything like that. So I want to be a little bit careful about that. But the 4 layers that have been defined, as one is sensing, the second one is data collection and organization, then it's analytics, and then it's decision support. And we're planning to define maturity levels for each one of these layers, because technology as a whole is just too complicated to be, you know, to be just dumped into one basket. So I wouldn't mind having like a little bit of a private screening of advanced, you know, to give a preview of these things that we're working on, because I think it might help us as we look at technology at different parts of that technology stack.
Yep. I'd appreciate
I would
that.
be very, very interested in participating and learning from that, Cello.
Yeah, because you know, I don't want to take too much time today, but I'd be very happy to present on that, and we can kind of keep it private because it's still work in progress, and it's WRF, you know, it's WRF effort that's a different vein, but I think that it would be very useful if these projects that WRF has were not, that they were not silos themselves, that there's a little bit of interaction on research that's actually related. And this, since I'm on both projects, I think this gives us a good opportunity to connect the dots on 2 efforts that should be should be more integrated.
Good. Okay. I think the action we're probably taking away from this, Pat, is to just to come up with a bit of a plan and a schedule for what these sessions look like over the next months. Yeah. Great. Okay. So just quickly to round out the asset groups, is there anything on that list that people think are missing from their sort of organization perspective? I think it's useful just to come up with that wider list as a starting point for sure.
This is Chris again.
Yep.
I'm not sure whether some of the asset types that we have apply to other organizations, but we do have dams.
Yep.
And also we are focusing on the works yards and the sort of base building elements of
Yep.
all these
Etc.
actually
Yep.
all these process facilities.
Cool.
Yeah, so they'll be great to add those.
That's good. Good.
If you got dams, you might add reservoirs.
Yeah, we do have
Yeah.
reservoirs too.
We have those as well.
Depends how you operate the flood defense over here, but you could create a reservoir.
Yes.
That's great. Okay, good. Well, I think we've got our lists there. If we take away, the action to probably just consolidate some of those on as per your suggestion, Scott. I think that's good. And then think about how we frame some of the workshops to come out with some of the case study elements as well for us to work across. But yeah, we'll send out the poll now and try and capture feedback. I'd say probably over the next week, Pat, so that we can then get an advanced agenda in place for 2 weeks time. Admittedly, I'm a bit behind things myself this week.
It seems like there's two questions here, Richard. One is, what are you willing to present on? And the other is, what are you interested in hearing? And,
Yeah.
and how do you frame the question? Different answer?
Yep. That's a very good question. A good question to question.
I was also going to say, this is fairly tactical, but if we say, aside from holiday interruptions, that we have X number of there's a schedule that we would have for, just building on what Doug just said, either presentations or an interest in hearing about things and discussing things. And if those things could ultimately get scheduled based on the survey and the feedback and everything, and then it's almost like a parallel type of topic would be, what do we feel we're already in a position to share? Let's say in a first workshop that we have with a wider audience. And I think that there's a couple candidates, where we've already heard about some things that would be of interest, to a wider group. So just some thoughts, just thinking ahead to where we're going here.
Mm-hmm.
On that tactical piece, I did just do a quick calendar, and if we keep these on the Thursdays that they are, we really have 3 for the remainder of the year, because one falls on Thanksgiving here in the US and the other on Christmas Eve here in the US. So we're looking at October 29th, and if Doug's doing his presentation with someone else, and then 11/12 and then 12/10. So I think that's a good thought, just to think practically. If we wanted to keep this cadence, those are the 3 we have for the year.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah. And not to, this is just what's in my mind, so I'm saying it, but in terms, if we were to have one workshop as opposed to information sharing and dialogue with this group only, one workshop before the end of the year, I may be jumping the gun, but I think that basically the digital AMP and perhaps what Cello shares with this group, next meeting, might be of wide interest. And then it's not to say there wouldn't be other items on this list for future workshops, but I'm just thinking of our ability to, communicate from this team, things that we've covered so far.
There's another thing that I can do is I actually I have a video that is, I think, maybe 8 minutes or something like that, not very long, that lays out the principles of what we're doing on that other project, but it's a rough draft. It hasn't been vetted. So if I could count on your discretion not to share it, just because, I'm part of that other team on the other project, and I don't see it as competing, but I want to sort of, I would be glad to, instead of having to wait for 2 weeks to hear about it, to provide information earlier. Let me just check with the people on the project management on the other, my co-PIs on the other project, to see if they would be okay with that. And what would be, I think, nice synergy is you could also provide comments whether you find those thoughts to be reasonable or not. So I think Jenny brought up a really, really good point. We don't have, we don't have that many opportunities to talk anymore, and workshop is a great idea.
Yeah, I think it shouldn't just be an aspiration. Let's get a workshop in before Christmas.
Yeah.
Celebrate for Christmas that way, because it sounds like that'll probably fall after the Thanksgiving session. Yeah, for Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you once again, everyone. I do look forward to these sessions every fortnight. It's always good to hear what's going on from particularly in the States, I guess. But yeah, is there any other, before we close it down then, any other business? No problems. Cool. Well, we will be in touch with the poll and look to get that schedule